Then we will now return to item number 3. Dr. Stella, thank you for waiting. And we have our Board of Education update. Okay, so can we come back to order, please, for Dr.
Well, I know it's a long night. I'll try to shorten this a little bit. Thank you for the opportunity to give a monthly update. I just want to mention that I have seen the town emergency response team in action numerous times. We've worked with them, and we're very, very lucky to have this kind of structure. And also Leslie Balch and personnel at the Health District are fantastic. We're in ongoing communication with them on any problems or challenges that we have. UI has been very, very good too, so we're very blessed with that. Beecher Road School, as we know, is more than a series of structures, of interconnected structures. It's a living community, and we treasure the community relations we have with all aspects of our town, so my report deals with community. Since my last report, of course, we've had the Halloween Hoot, which was larger numbers than ever before, and it gave a chance for not only our parent community to come, but also citizens or families from within Woodbridge, and lots of staff, volunteers, and so on. Sometimes we take for granted things, but I don't want to tonight. Our police force and our fire department, fire marshal, they were there right alongside of us, and even months in advance helping us to prepare for this community event that brought everyone together. And on October 31st, the Woodbridge Fire Department did a great community service by sponsoring a truck or treat Halloween event. Over 2,500 people attended that. And among the other volunteers, Ellen and I were giving out hot dogs and hamburgers, no charge, but it gave us a chance to really talk with people. There was joy, there was interaction, there was laughter. It was a true community event, the kind that makes Woodbridge a very unique place. So kudos to Chief Sean Rowland and the team. Yesterday was Veterans Day, and yes, there was school, but it was a powerful day of learning for our children. We started with a school-wide assembly in front of the north entrance. 800 children gathered outside. They were so respectful, so well-behaved. Our marching band was there with patriotic songs. Our first selectman came to speak and give some words and insights to the children. We also had Dr. Barry Joseph, a retired Army captain who served in Vietnam and is a citizen in Woodbridge. When I spoke, my second sentence after saying good morning and welcome was to give a charge to the children, and that was that children, by the end of the day, I'm asking you to walk away from here with a greater awareness of what, and more insights as to what Veterans Day is, and to carry that conversation to the dinner table at home with your family. And I asked the teachers to support that. There was such a rich menu of different kinds of activities during the day, including many visitors, many veterans from our town, from our families, and so on, visiting the classrooms and speaking with the children. We had a wall of honor with the list of, I would say, hundreds and hundreds of names of people connected with families in our Beecher Road community. And Mrs. Prisco, our principal, started an initiative which is a good one. She brought over to the Veterans Hospital in West Haven hundreds of cards and letters written by our children to make a connection with the veterans. And many of the veterans there expressed the wish to come and join with us next year at our celebration. So that's another bridge that took place. Beecher Road School has a rich culture of learning. I love to walk through the school. We call it the long mile from my office right through and I never know what I'm going to see. But yesterday, for example, I walked into a kindergarten class, and there was Dr. Scott Miller, the head of the chemistry department at Yale, giving a workshop to our kindergarten children on the different forms of matter. And the children, including his daughter, Jacqueline, were making all kinds of predictions in a very excited way. That's a tiny example of the contribution that our community, aside from tax dollars and so on, makes to our school system. Another day this past week, I went into the North Gym. It was crowded. There were 25 students from Southern's Physical Education and Science program. They had set up 12 exercise stations throughout the gym consisting of equipment that the students built themselves. And they were coaching our students from the 6th grade classes under Mr. Taddy's supervision. They donated their equipment to the school afterwards. But it's the magic of the school and the excitement of the school and the ongoing learning opportunities that goes beyond the curriculum. Now, let me go to another point, demographic. I heard demographic projections. As recently as 2 years ago, the projections were that we would have a student population of 717. We're approximately 800 students right now. And again, it has a lot to do with families moving in. Thank you very much, taxpayers, Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, Board of Education, for supporting our addition of 3 additional classes. If we didn't have them, we would have been in trouble. And we are preparing for whatever changes will take place in the future this time. The building project is slowing down as planned. Looking back, we are extremely grateful to everyone involved, including our citizens, for the support given. Our A wing was so important to get that done. Our C wing, for the many controls, valves, transformers, all those things above the ceiling that were done in anticipation of the major work that's going to happen this summer. Budget-wise, we're fortunate to have a representative from the town's Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen as active members of our Finance Committee. So that leads to transparency, exchange of ideas, and communication. We will be, and also I have a wonderful opportunity of meeting with the first selectmen, Tony Genovese and Matt Giglietti, every month. We had a meeting this morning. Again, we don't want any surprises for the town, and it gives us a chance to just have ongoing conversations about that. So we anticipate, we're starting to work on budget. We anticipate presenting the superintendent's recommendation to the board in December. We anticipate that the board will have their approved budget by the end of January and February. And we will, I assure you, we will follow our mantra that we've used every year, and that is maintain the high quality of education, improve it at Beechwood Road School, and at the same time, watch out for the taxpayer. As we have all agreed upon in our communications, we promised that we would let the town know if there's any unexpected costs, especially in the area of special education, which is a very fluid area in towns throughout the state. As of today, we have approximately $50,000 to $55,000 in unexpected cost. At this point, however, we feel that we could handle that amount with some unexpected savings in other accounts. So I just want you to make you aware of it, and we will continue on a monthly basis telling you what the status is. If there are any savings in special ed, as we've done in the past, we'll tell you. If there are unexpected costs, we will tell you. I am very honored to be alongside my colleague, Superintendent Chip Dumais, is on the agenda. I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate once again Amity on being named the #1 high school in Connecticut, and for all the right reasons, and for being given the highly acclaimed status of Blue Ribbon School by the Department of Education. That's a real big deal. We should have a marching band all around with that. And we feel proud to be part of a high-achieving pre-K to 12 school system. We work closely together. Our superintendents do, our principals do, our teachers do. And we're proud of this town, the town that has a heritage of investment in education and community. So thank you all very much for your ongoing support.
Thank you very much. And now, as previewed, Superintendent Dumais.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. So aside from being here for a Board of Finance meeting, this is, for the most part, my first time before the Woodbridge Board of Selectmen. So I thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to spending some more time here in the future explaining what's happening at the Amity Regional School District. A little bit of an overview today.
It's the plaque. I recognize the box.
Yeah. This box is, it has more, well, there's, ooh, Yeah, there's something in there. But
Maybe it's the cake Tony was
what
looking
goes
for.
in this box, though, the unique thing about Amity Regional School District, of course, represents the three towns, Bethany, Orange, and Woodbridge. And there are about 17 regional school districts in Connecticut. And as a superintendent of a regional school district, the rules are a little bit different than they are for a local school district. Regional school districts have a number of different rules they follow, especially when it comes to finances and some other things. A regional school district can own property, so Amity can, separately buy property as far as the school district is concerned. And there are other things that we have to observe in terms of how the financial operations are done. This box is the plaque, so I'll ruin the surprise. I'll take the plaque out. Straight from Washington, D.C. Yesterday is the blue ribbon plaque for Amity Regional High School.
Congratulations.
As I have said, I jumped on a fast-moving train. I have come into a place where things are going very well. And which brings up another really interesting point, is that when we talk about developing district goals, what do district goals look like when you're, and I walk around with this now, when you have a plaque that says you're a blue ribbon school, and a number of different measures say that you're doing a really good job. If you take a look at the Amity goals, the Amity goals talk about growth and talk about enhancing, and they talk about improvement. And that's really what goes into this type of award. This type of award has more to do with always focusing on doing a better job at what we're doing than just meeting a particular benchmark. The benchmark is really about growth. This also represents, it is designated for the high school, but it represents the work of everything K-12. Good things don't happen at a high school unless great things happen at middle schools, and awesome things happen at elementary schools for the kids that feed into there. And one of the things that our middle school in Bethany does a really good job of doing is taking two towns, and the educational systems in the three towns are a little bit different. And that's actually one of our goals, is how do we become better? Greater coordination between the four districts is one of our goals. And in doing that, we'll better serve the kids of all three towns, especially when they get to the middle schools and the high school. But that's what's represented here, is all that hard work done over all of the schools in the three towns. This is not just about Amity High School. So, the other thing, as far as the district goals are concerned, in coordination, is how do we do what we're doing better? And one of the keys is personalizing the student learning experience. Making sure that we have opportunities and we create opportunities for students to explore ways to learn that aren't just confined to the classroom. Learning has really become so much more than just going to class. So we're looking for opportunities that we can recognize the learning that kids are doing outside of the classroom throughout the day and throughout their lives. It should seem pretty odd to people that all the students arrive on the first day of school and all the students finish geometry on the last day of school. It should seem odd. Not every kid learns at the same pace. Our goal is to create an educational environment, little steps at a time, that recognizes the individual nature of students and allows them to learn about things that will reach those goals of being college and career ready, but at a pace and in a context that's more individualized.
Well, I believe you have students from the critical issues class here tonight. They'll be reporting on you tomorrow, right?
They were critical issue students at the Board of Education meeting Monday night.
I think this same group was at the police commission meeting, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They're doing a lot of learning.
So to do that requires that we re-examine what we're doing at school. It is a fantastic school system doing wonderful things. As Dr. Stella was talking about this week, This week was the same for us. We go to school on Veterans Day, and the recognition that we have at each of the schools is just amazing. We had an author who's local to the school district in today, who's just written a book about bullying. And I brought it only because these are the kinds of things that happen every day, taking advantage of the people, the experiences that people in our community have to help educate students. So.
Thank you. When I first invited Superintendent Dumais, it was for an introduction, come tell us about what's happening, and as he said, to get to know us a little better and for us to get to know him. Since then, we've had some questions about the Amity budget, and I forwarded them. Joe, you asked a series of questions which I forwarded to Superintendent Dumais. So if you want to speak a little bit about the budget, and then if there are any follow-up questions, we can go to those.
We are, the budget process for a regional school district, because there's no single town to which we report, there's the Amity Finance Committee. The Amity Finance Committee is made up of people from the Board of Education for Amity, as well as representatives from each of the 3 towns. The Finance Committee meets monthly before each one of the Board of Education meetings, and all finance decisions go through the Amity Finance Committee before they go to the Board of Education. The Board of Education has the final decision as to those financial decisions, but the recommendations are made by the Finance Committee. In some of the questions that came up involve how things happen in regional districts versus how things happen in regular districts, as well as how Amity has handled some of the financial communication. I'm sure that you're aware that years ago there were some financial issues at the Amity Regional School District. I've got to say, having worked in a number of school districts, and I brought one example today, that in terms of transparency and the volume and quality of information that comes out from the school district, Jack Levine is the Director of Finance and Administration, and he does an amazing job of preparing what are current budget documents, forecast documents, explanations of variances at every one of these meetings, and a number of appendices that talk about expenditures by category, cost-saving efforts, and a whole number of other things in terms of our progress on individual accounts, including health and medical. So or I should say just medical. But these are documents that are public and sent out on a monthly basis to everybody who's on the posting for this. One of the things that we're doing this year, and that I believe is important in the budget process, even though this exists, and when this exists, right now, if you were to ask what variances there are from the Amity budget, I could tell you exactly where we are. It's right here in this document. You would know exactly. In terms of, I think the big question is about the surplus at Amity and how the surplus is addressed and what happens as the year goes on. I started on March 1st, and on March 1st, we were very close to a board meeting, it's the first Monday of the month, and I picked up one of these documents, and it says essentially what the surplus is at that time anticipated. And then there are also, so that the community is well aware, and anticipated uses of some of those things. Over the last 7 or 8 years, the Amity surplus has averaged about $779,000. The regional schools are very restricted in terms of what they can do in terms of maintaining a fund balance. Just recently, the laws have changed so that you can have capital reserve accounts as long as you've designated that for a particular expense. Of the 779 on average, and by the way, that represents less than 2% of the operating budget. We would like it to be 0. We would not like it to be -1, because that would mean going back to the towns and asking for money. But what happens to that money and how much of it goes back to the towns? On average of that $779,000, $392,000 a year goes back to the towns. And that money is divided based on the allocation in each town. Woodbridge is about 30% of what it costs to maintain Amity. Orange is about 50, and that leaves 20 for Bethany. In the last 7 or 8 years, 2010, 2011, there was nothing returned to the towns, and this summer there was very little returned to the towns. The money from this summer, or the allocation that was there, just recently, the Amity Regional School District went to self-funding for health insurance. The program is young, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out where we should be in terms of, are we predicting our claims appropriately? Are we maintaining a reserve balance that covers the costs that we might incur? Because we are obligated to all those costs. The large portion of the surplus from last year went to bring the reserve balance for healthcare up to about 22% or so. Where it should be is certainly a question. Our professionals, in terms of our consultants, have told us somewhere between 20 and 25 would be the appropriate target. Other ones that I've heard might go as low as 18. Our goal is to maintain a 3-year balance that's somewhere between 18 and 25. And what anticipated, it being a young...
I think what I'm hearing is that you have the discretion to use surplus funds for items that were not anticipated in the budget for that year, right?
Absolutely.
So my question would be, why wasn't it anticipated in that budget for that year?
There are a couple of areas of budgeting for any organization, school specifically, that become very complicated. So if we take a look, and during our normal budget presentation, and I'd be more than glad to go into some more depth at a time when we have some more time, the two areas, one would be healthcare and our ability to predict claims. A pregnancy or 2 or 3 has a dramatic effect on what our healthcare costs are, and in the last year there were a number of them. So there's one example. The other example is our Director of Pupil Services puts in a tremendous amount of effort in trying to help create programs in Amity that will help address the needs of special education students. If somebody is outplaced, it's possible that tuition could be $120,000 and transportation could easily be $70,000. In that type of case, that's a swing of $200,000. And in past years, the swing for special ed has been about $200,000.
Is in your budget?
The contingency is very small, roughly around $150,000, and because again, in terms of what regional school districts can do in terms of money, closely related to what we have for revenue versus expenditures, and also our inability, except for small amounts designated for specific projects, to carry money over to another year.
I'm trying to give you a hard time. I actually was on that board, and Jack Levine does a great job. I'm just trying to understand it a little bit. So.
I'm not taking it that way.
Okay, good, thanks.
Can you answer a couple of quick questions? I hear some people in the crowd hearing your numbers on the average. Can you fill us back in, for those who may not know, what the surplus was this year and what was returned, if any, to the towns?
This year, the surplus was roughly $800,000, high $700,000, and of that, none of that was returned to the towns. What was returned to the towns was carryover expenditures from the 2012-2013 year, that we wait the year until the auditors say it's okay, and that was distributed to the towns. But that was a total under $100,000.
Can you give us a breakdown? I've seen it in the newspaper actually once, but if you could provide us with a quick breakdown or outline of what that money, the $800,000, was spent on. Obviously, you made reference to the medical.
Sure. I can give you the 3 biggest pieces of that.
Yeah.
The 3 biggest pieces of that would have been the medical reserve at somewhere just over $550,000. About $130,000, if I'm not mistaken, to make a repair on the cooling towers, where the need for that wasn't determined until May or June. And the last piece was funding the OPEB trust.
One last for me. Do you account for that money back to the 3 member towns of the district? The surplus money, do you?
When you say account for,
Well, if you spent that money in that fashion, then what's the process to account back to the towns that we had this surplus and here's how we spent the taxpayers' money?
It's every month, all of the financials from Amity are made public, and it includes that. And the only way that surplus can be spent is through a board vote. Board of Education.
Okay.
Yeah. As
But
advised by the...
it's published out there, but it's not directly presented back to the towns that, hey, you guys sent us $800,000 surplus and here's how we spent it. That's all my question. I mean, is there some mechanism to get it back to this board or the first selectman, or other than publishing it to the taxpayers of the member towns that, yes, you guys sent a surplus funds and here's how we spent it?
That's an interesting concept when you say sent surplus funds.
Well, I mean, we allocated funds to you guys,
Well,
right?
actually, you know, the budget, we don't allocate it. It's voted on by all of the residents of the towns. We actually have no say,
Well, right, but-
except as voters.
Right, but they voted on a budget.
Right,
And that budget number happened to be $800,000 more than was spent. So my only question is, how do the people who voted for that number that turned out to be 800 less, how do they know how that money was spent? That's my only question.
It's done in a public meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have last one. So we have you here, it's right before budget time, I've got to ask you, after having a surplus last year, do you anticipate an increase in your budget this year, or should we anticipate something similar?
We don't want to put you on the spot about your budget for next year. If there's something you can say, but, you know, we'll be having our budget meetings, and then we can get more into detail at that time.
I understand.
The question becomes not whether or not there's a surplus, because the existence of a surplus, it doesn't mean that that there are extravagant purchases that are being made with those, which is why during the budget, pardon? Or sauna. That's why during the budget process, and actually that's part of the reason why we're starting meetings with the finance directors from each of the towns, as well as the first selectman, to make sure that these conversations happen earlier, in that this would be a difficult piece. To say there should be no surplus puts a district or an organization in a place. I will say this, I think that Amity does a great job of finding savings. And we want to continue to encourage those efforts to find savings. And at the same time, none of the purchases have been ones that, they're vetted by the Finance Committee and by the Board of Ed, so they haven't been extravagant. We are trying to budget specifically for what we need. And I'll give you an example that it can't be anticipated. When the superintendent retired, the hiring me was a significant change in salary. So that's something that was budgeted for. And of course, school budgets are created sometimes 18 months before the money is actually spent. To be able to predict 18 months from now what special education need we would have, or what claims we would have for medical insurance, it's to be within 2%. I think is pretty darn good. So really, it's more conversations about, well, what are the town's expectations when there is a surplus, and in that conversation, I don't think it's so much about a dollar amount, but more about a philosophy that if we could prioritize and work with the towns to say, the cooling tower, for example, we have our own people inspect that. Our own people in May found out, hey, you know what? There's something here that's beyond us. Let's have professionals come in and inspect it. That was done in June. The last board meeting's in June. There's no board meeting in July. In August, that presents itself as needing repair, and that's how the money was allocated. having been part of this process for 8 months and now starting with Jack there on developing this budget for this year, we'll show you that the spending is responsible. And we'll have greater communication earlier about those other pieces. Even though this is out there, I'll be here more than once over the next year to let people know about where we are. As far as developing a budget for this year, we do have a slight, the enrollment is interesting. Dr. Stella was just talking about how enrollment at the K-6 level is starting to increase or be a little bit above projection. We are decreasing a little at the 7-12 level, but there are a couple of very unpredictable years if you were to ask anybody who goes ahead and does projections for enrollment, and that would include 9th grade and kindergarten. Those are big ones. So our current projection is showing an even larger increase anticipated for kindergarten. So you can anticipate for a year or 2 or 3 a slight decrease at 7-12, and then it'll start coming back up again. We're currently in negotiation with our largest union, the teachers union, and that'll be done prior to this budget being completed. But that's a piece where in the last contract, there was essentially only step or 0% in the first year. That's certainly not what's being supported by the current economy in terms of teacher contracts. So that would be something for us to anticipate an additional expense. So we're going to try to be creative with healthcare and see what we can do to manage those expenses.
Anything else, Lawrence?
I was at the board meeting when the surplus was reallocated, and as I remember, the votes by your board were fairly lopsided, and each of the 3 towns is represented proportionally on that board?
Yeah, each of the 3 towns is represented by their population. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. I brought something for you that's hot off the presses. The school profile for the high school is out, so I'll leave those if you want to share them with people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks.